We want to talk about ARDF orienteering, what it is, the use of topographical maps, radio orienteering, the differences between regular orienteering and the ARDF courses, events, what I call getting started on the cheap, which is what we always strive for to get people involved in the sport, of the variety of receivers for 2 meters and 80 meters, some directional antennas, attenuators, some of the Foxes we use for the 2 meter and 80 meters, and some miscellaneous equipment. Now, I have a brief video here, which I'm not going to play all of it. I'm just going to play about 5 minutes of it, just to get you introduced to it.
Natural landscapes, winding forest trails, and fresh air. This is the arena for radio orienteering. Radio orienteering is an energetic and adventurous, yet intellectual sport. It requires physical endurance aligned with a sharp mind. The goal is to find foxes hidden in the forest as fast as possible by using a radio receiver, a compass, and a map. The sport is also known as radio fox hunting. Just like on a real hunt, you feel the thrill and anticipation of closing in on your goal. Though the fox is not a fluffy red animal. The fox is a radio transmitter that sends out a signal. The fox hunter does not have a rifle. He is equipped with a special radio receiver. By operating the receiver, the hunter is guided to where the fox is hiding. Though, like a real fox, these transmitters are sly, and finding them requires some skill on the part of the hunter. Calculating your strategy begins as soon as you receive your map, on which only the starting and finishing points are marked. You can immediately get a sense of the terrain and map out your route by predicting where the foxes may be hiding. This is it. The chess match has begun. The first fox sends out a signal. The second, the third. Where to begin? A skillfully planned route may be the difference between failure and success. Each hunter is in search of his goal, the fox. It's hidden where the signal direction is the loudest and amplifies even more as you approach it. Sounds easy? Not so fast. There is more than just one fox. Each fox sends out its own unique signal alternately. Two different bands are used to transmit signals. Each of the two bands is used during the competition. It is for this reason that the receivers and their antenna have different constructions. So as not to rush randomly through the forest and lose valuable time, you must estimate the proximity of each of the foxes by measuring their signal strengths and strategize an order and a route in which to hunt them down. Your every action is like the next move in a chess match. Here is the hideout of the first fox, a point marked on the hunter's route. This marker, or control point, is represented by an orange and white flag. The radio transmitter is hidden here. The hunter quickly registers his capture and runs off to the next fox. On classical routes, youngsters and senior citizens hunt only 3 foxes. Women hunt 4, and men hunt 5. In radio fox hunting, running the fastest does not guarantee victory. You also have to be savvy with your strategy. At last, the home stretch, the final and most decisive flag. Here is where physical training may make the difference. The first seconds after crossing the finish line are most emotional. Radio orienteering is an international sport. The first competitions were held in Sweden over half a century ago. Today, competitions are held in many countries all across the world. The popularity of international competitions increases each year. Amateurs compete alongside experienced runners. The main international events of radio orienteering are the Championship of Europe, the World Championship, and the Youth Championship. The 17th World Championship was hosted by Kazakhstan. Around 300 competitors from 25 countries came together in the beautiful pine forests of the Burabay National Park. The last days of the World Championship. The sprint and fox soaring competitions. Just seconds after the finish, each runner is handed the results on control cards. Near the finish line, monitors display the results of those runners who have finished, as well as those runners who are still competing. Of course, results are important, as is the friendship and the sportsmanship among competitors. During these emotional moments, even common languages are useless to communicate the feelings they share with each other.
There we go. We're going to move through some of this quickly, but basically radio orienteering is a combination of skills, orienteering and radio direction finding, along with the ability to move across some wooded terrain for some distance. You have a map and you have a compass and you have a directional receiver. Regular orienteering gives you a map with dedicated points on it, which are called control flags, and you've got to go from point to point to point. In radio orienteering, as they said in the video, you have a start right there, and you have a finish, and nothing else is on the map. You have to do your own triangulation and determine a route to find the transmitters on the course. So topographical maps have colors, scales, orienteering lines, contour lines, a lot of features. And when I first started getting into radio orienteering, I knew how to fox hunt, and I'd done it mobile, but I'd never done any orienteering. So it was a new skill for me. And I spent about a year and a half getting lost very badly before I started making sense of some of the terrain and some of the maps. It's a topographical map. It has international standard colors and symbols no matter where I go in the world. The maps all look the same, which makes it nice. They all have the same scale distances. They are all metric. They have unit intervals. They all point north, magnetic north for the region. They all have shapes and contours. And these are the things that we get to learn as we move through them, what they are: man-made objects, shapes of land masses, what's it look like in real life versus what you're looking like on the map. This knoll right here is this knoll right here, probably. Open forest, heavy forest, thicker vegetation. Always tease people when we teach it. I can run through this and I can get through this. When it comes to these colors, I say bring your machete or go around it, because it's very difficult to get through. It's that thick. When you do the course, sometimes the most direct course is not the best route, and I can attest to that. Sometimes it's not the same. As you can see, there's tons of information about it. We are going to skip over that. The one thing I do have to mention, though, is you saw in the video, this is called a sport ident stick. And this here is a control point. Now, in radio orienteering, no matter which competition we do, we use these control sticks. And what you do is it's blank when you start. You hit a go control, and it records a time on it. And then as you find each location, it writes to the chip. When it puts it in the control, it says you found this particular, in this case, it says number 122. On our course, it would say you found MOE, for instance, the first control. And it records your time and which one you found. When you finish your course, you're going to get a printout that's going to say, yes, you found your 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 of them, what order you found them in, how long it took you to do the total course, and how long between each one of the controls. So that is all printed out with these control sticks. Okay, so we're going to talk about, you're familiar with mobile hunts. I guess you are. I'm sure you've done them in the past. Always tease about these. We've been doing mobile hunts for probably 50 years now. Typical group. I always get jest when I show this particular picture, this multi-element Yuggy the guy's got on his car. This is typically what I use, is the little 4-element close-spaced 2-meter beam. And this is mobile, and I'm sure you're all very familiar with it. So again, we just bring it up, okay? What we're going to talk about is classic radio orienteering. On the map, you only have a start and a finish marked. Typically, there are 5 beacons are placed out on the course and transmit the location for 1 minute, repeatedly at 5-minute intervals. In other words, the first beacon goes off for a minute and it turns itself off. And then the second one comes on, the third, then the fourth, then the fifth. This happened to be Prince William Forest, and this was the Nationals up in Virginia in April of 22. This is our start triangle right here. And in classic orienteering, you have an exclusion zone. And this exclusion zone is marked by this arc. That's 750 meters, or approximately half a mile. There cannot be anything inside of that. The locations and transmitters were here, and here, and here, and here, and here. And then you had to return to the finish. Now, things to note about radio orienteering courses is depending on your age and or class, like women and or men's, you only find certain transmitters. If you're a young person of age 19 or 21, you have to find all 5 transmitters. If you are an M70 or M75 like I am, I had to find 3 transmitters. But they tend to make up for that. I only have to find 3, but I had to find, amongst other things, this one, and this one, and this one. And if you look at the distance, I probably ran as far as the people who did 5 transmitters, because they make us go way, way out from here to here, for instance. So that is one thing. You can find them, by the way, in any order, and they're all in the same frequency, okay? So radio orienteering, there's 4 different competitions in radio orienteering. We have what they call a classic 2-meter course, a classic 80-meter course, something called a FOXO, which is a combination of orienteering and radio direction finding, in a sprint course, which is very short and fast. It's typically winners are 30 minutes or less. And world class, the transmitters, instead of being on for a minute at a time, they're on for 12 seconds. So in a 1-minute interval, you hear all 5 transmitters. And you find 3 to 5, and then you go through what they call a spectator's beacon, and then you go out and find 3 to 5 more on a different frequency. So it's a very fast-paced event, okay? In the U.S., we have nationals that are held yearly. This last year, they were in Sulphur Springs, Texas in late April. This is, again, the course. We started down here by the water, and courses brought us way out up this way across it. So if you made a mistake, you could find out, hey, you can take a shortcut across here. There was a trail. If not, you ran a long loop and wasted a lot of time. So you had to be careful. Okay. What you need in the basics. This is the key part of it, okay? You need a 2-meter receiver and an attenuator, because, of course, as the signal gets too strong, the S-meter on your radio pegs out at the top. You do a 360-degree turn, and it still pegs out at the top, and you lose all sense of direction. So you need some sort of attenuator, and of course, you need a receiver with an S-meter. On 80 meters, again, you need a receiver / antenna and an attenuator, okay? On 2 meters, a directional antenna. And of course, a compass and a map come in really handy, okay? Typical compass is like this. This is called a Moscow compass. Tape measure antennas are extremely popular. There are a variety of receivers, this receiver, 80-meter receiver, and this is a 500 kilohertz offset attenuator for dampening your signal. These are called Rig Expert 80-meter and 2-meter antennas. And this is the typical course again. Anybody look at this compass real quick? Does anybody say anything different about this compass? The numbers are backwards. If I were to take that compass and point north at the top of the boom on my antenna, like right here, and then I turned my antenna 90 degrees to the east, what would my compass do? It would automatically rotate this direction to try and point north, right?
Yeah.
And it would tell me that my bearing is 90 degrees. It's a direct reading on the compass. On a normal compass, in order to get the bearing, you'd have to rotate the bezel 90 degrees to get it to point north. And then you'd have to take and read your bearing. With these compasses, or the fact that this is really a normal compass where we just made an adhesive template that we've stuck over the top of it, we get a direct reading on our bearing. Very fast, no thinking involved. Okay, that's a trick that you learn. It saves a lot of time. The most important thing I've always taught this, getting started on the cheap. Okay, I tape measure antenna, and in one form or another, probably 95%, 90% or more of the competitors that I've seen, and I've seen 300 competitors on a course, use some form of a tape measure antenna. I've seen a couple log periodics. I've seen a couple people use arrow antennas, but take them through the dense woods and elements break real fast. So tape measures is the way to go. They're flexible and they're easily replaced, and they're very inexpensive to make. The other thing you need is some sort of an attenuator to get started. 4 megahertz offset attenuator. So whatever frequency you're operating, you want to hunt, you put your receiver 4 megs off. Like if I was hunting 146.52, I set my receiver at 150.52, put this in line, and then with my S meter, as the signal gets too strong, I just simply turn my knob from max to min, and I keep this on scale. As I get closer and closer, you can walk right up to your transmitter and still get an S meter and a bearing. So this is one we'll talk a little bit more in a minute, and it works very well. Another thing, you need a transmitter. Well, the cheap and dirty, again, getting started on the cheap, ARDF receivers. Boy, there's a lot of them. I first started with a good old-fashioned handheld and a 500 kilohertz offset attenuator. That was the first one I used, and they work. And matter of fact, I've got about 40 sitting behind me that we're going to use for a group of guys who are going to be some hunting here next week. We lend them out. So they just hook them up to the radio. They set the frequency 500 kilohertz off and dial it down as they approach it. And the board inside of this has about a dozen components. It's very small. It's about a ½ inch by about 1.5 inches. Relatively easy to assemble. And there's a place in the US here called FAR Circuits that still manufactures the board. It's been around since about 1995, I think. If you go back in time, the Ron Graham receiver was a 2-meter AM receiver. Very popular nowadays is the VK3 YNG Sniffer 4 by Brian Garbrandt out of Australia. He has sold, I don't know, thousands of these. Now, they've been out of production for about 2.5 or 3 years now because of the COVID epidemic. Last time I spoke with him was a few months ago. He is trying desperately to get back into production for remanufacture of these. So with a little bit of luck, they'll be available again because they are very easy to use, can store up to 6 memories, and they do what we call auto ramping or automatic attenuation. Very popular amongst radio orienteers, and are used by probably 50% of the people or more. Unfortunately, as I said, they're hard to get a hold of. What I have here is a predecessor, DF1FO. Nick Roth made these. He's a good friend. And he designed these boards, and there's the insides of it. This is fully synthesized. Again, programmable, automatic attenuation. This is approaching the Cadillac version of a receiver. So you go from, something here costs you $20 to something here that, if you buy the Rig Expert version, could come up to almost $500 now. And this is what the Rig Expert version looks like, that he sold all his materials out to and his designs. And they manufactured them for a while, and they discontinued manufacturing at the moment. And this, of course, was a good old-fashioned homebrew that somebody put together with a handheld and an attenuator. So 2-meter receivers, a wide variety. To get started, handheld and an attenuator. That's all you need with an S-meter. Okay. 80-meter receivers, they cover the gamut of all kinds of things. And you may recognize one of them, I'm sure. But if you go back far enough, there's something called the Altai. And it's one of the most sensitive receivers I've ever seen for as complicated receiver as was, and it comes out of the 1940s. The German receiver was very active, and you can go through a whole variety. This again is Nick Ross 80-meter version. The Chinese versions, which I'm sure you've heard of. The RX-80M, which I recently picked up a couple months ago and did some testing with to see how it compared to all the other ones, and we'll show you a chart on that. And of course, the Rig Expert 3500, which is what I actually use in competition now. One of the hottest receivers out there, and great directivity. So that's important. Okay. Here's the 80-meter receivers. And I did a little playing around with them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them. And there's for the RX-80. And this is a very subjective test as to how far away I can hear a 10 milliwatt 80-meter transmitter. Okay. And of course, this is the Rig Expert version way out here. But as far as they go, this receiver right here would do very well in what we call Fox orienteering. Okay, so directional antennas, I'm going to talk about predominantly nothing but the Yagi antenna. The Yagi, here's a 4-element log periodic, so to speak. But this is the tape measure. This is the tape measure. And we've done some modification over the years. These are 3D printed cross-member pieces on a tape measure antenna that work very well, and people like them. Okay, you have a broad peak. You have a sharp nose on both the sides. It practical size limits. It has a very good gain factor. Okay, relatively easy to build, inexpensive and lightweight. Has a narrow effective bandwidth. Okay, can be a little more difficult to transport in a car and deploy, but not too bad. We've learned to roll the elements up and then deploy them later on. When you travel with them, you got to figure out some way to pack them up. We actually put a coupling in the middle so you can take them apart. Okay, but they have great gain for distance transmitters. They do require an attenuator to use when you're closer to the transmitters. Okay. If you want to see what it looks like, this is a very simple kit. And the original designer of it, Joe Leggio, you go to any website and type tape measure antenna, and you'll find the prints for it and the schematic and the parts list to make it basic. This is theoretical, and this was an actual plot of what the 360-degree rotation of the tape measure was. As you can see, it has a very narrow dip. That's 146.52, and it's a great SWR. And as I say, youngsters carry them all the time. So that's very popular. 80 meters. And when we talked about the competitions, we talked about a sprint competition. We talked about a fox hunt competition. We talked about, or Fox O competition. We talked about classic 2-meter and classic 80-meter. You may note that 3 out of those 4 competitions use an 80-meter receiver. Therefore, you've got to come up with one of some sort. You'll see 2 designs. One uses a ferrite rod for directivity, and the other one uses a loop. Okay. The interesting thing is when you hunt on 2 meters, what do you hunt? The peak, right? Stronger signal. Well, on 80 meters, it's the reverse. On 80 meters, since if you were to think of a dipole antenna, you got what? You got two great big loops on the sides, but you got a very sharp null on the ends. So you hunt the weakest signal. You hunt the null. And then on the loop, it's by looking through it. And with the ferrite, it's like pointing it like a gun. That's the null because it radiates off the sides. It's like a dipole. So a little bit different concept. Also work, not as accurate to keep the S meter online as an active attenuator with its adjustable potentiometer. This is one made up on the West Coast. This in here is the 4 mag. This is a 500 kilohertz offset, and here you can see the board that's inside of it. It takes a 1.5 volt battery to run it. So again, something very popular. Okay, body fade, you know, elementary, you use it for shielding. You use your body as a shield and they say, well, it's on the other side of me or behind me. Okay. Passive attenuators, all kinds. Basically, it's a series of toggle switches you throw in line to dampen the signal to keep from overloading your receiver. Now, after a while, even these don't work because when you're on the fundamental frequency that you're hunting, and I've been on a few hunts where guys have been not so nice. Mobile hunt, I can think of a guy who decided, well, 50 watts is what I put out for you. You try DFing 50 watts within a couple 100 meters and see if you can get a bearing on it. Not real easy to do unless you've got an active attenuator. So this is the type of thing we use. Active attenuators, it's just so strong that you cannot hunt it. So the solution is to use an offset attenuator. What it is it consists of a small RF generator. In one case, it happened to be 4 megs. So it's a mixes with your incoming signal to produce new signals at a plus and minus. In other words, the 142 in this case and the 150 in this case. Okay. And then a potential on the board changes the injection level of the generator, which in turn attenuates the incoming mixed signal. So you're ready to a level where tracking can continue. Okay. Very fundamental explanation of it. Here's another one. This is called 3D Planet Solar, KC9ON. If you look him up, he manufactures a really inexpensive offset attenuator. Okay. It's a 4 meg offset. That's the whole circuit right there. And it comes as a kit, as you can see. And when I purchased this one, we did the camp down here, and they're doing it in Canada this year, actually, called Youth on the Air. We had 30 members build these from the kit. And I think when I got them from them, they were like $10 per kit. And then we 3D printed some boxes for them to mount them in. So this was, again, I've got a $10 tape measure antenna, and I've got a $10 4 meg offset attenuator, and I got a $20 Bofang radio or whatever radio I'm using. So I can get started fox hunting on 2 meters on foot real cheap if I need to. Now he's come out with a new version right here where it's all pre-mounted nicely in the box with everything inside pre-built if you want, and there's a switch on it. You can turn it, put it in line and take it out just by turning it on and off. And last checking, they were about $32. And then I could show you one here, maybe when we're done, if anybody wants to see it, because I've got one here. I'm going to be showing up at the Dayton Hamvention this year, because I'm always preaching getting into it and always preaching doing it cheaply. Okay. Miscellaneous equipment you need. You need your compass. I don't care if it's a regular compass or what it happens to have a reverse rosette. You have to understand a topographical map. This is a USGS map of a park up in Boston, Massachusetts. This is what it looks like. That's the topographical map of the same location right there. Okay, we started here on 80 meters, and we came down, down through this valley, and we found transparent here, and we came down in through here, and that equates to, if you look at it, you can see the trail here where we came down and through. And then we were on the other side where you see this loop, for instance, was a loop around here. We came on down around here, down into the finish across the bottom. So a little bit different looking, but something you have to learn to understand. This is Roosevelt State Park. This was down in Atlanta, Georgia, for another competition. But again, it's a topographical map. And if you don't know anything about them, you see a bunch of lines, these brown lines. Those are topographical maps are called contour lines. And there's a difference in elevation between each one of those lines. Some are 5 meters, some are 10 meters. And the more of them there are, and the closer together they are, the more the climb. So this happened to be one heck of a little hill that you had to climb up to on that particular course. Okay, foxes for 2 meters and 80 meters. And boy, again, that's a big variety. There's a micro foxes. There's some older ones called the TRO2 and the ATX80. These have been around for 20 years. We still use these. As a matter of fact, they're going to be using some of these at the Nationals this year. I've got a dozen of them downstairs. Rick Strobe makes a 3-watt 80-meter one that fits on a very small 2x3 board. It puts out 3 watts and is controlled with what we call a PIC controller. Bionics in the US makes a micro fox, 15 milliwatts, great for practice transmitting. We've got 2 or 3 of these. Though we did have the luxury of them being given to us by Bionics, we helped do a little code debugging for him. So we did that. We've got some 80-meter, 10 milliwatt pulsers. And you just go beep, 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 beep on the good old-fashioned color burst frequency, 3.579 megahertz. And they fit on a 1x1 board with all of 7 parts. And basically an auto switch. And these are used in the Foxo. And again, there's a variety of homebrew, bread pad, you name it, you can do it. Okay. This is the one I mentioned. This was the cheap ARDF controller for Bowfangs. This is his one version. An Adreno Nano, a battery, a resistor, that's it. You plug it in and away you go. Bionics makes a very nice one that fits on a board that goes on the back of a transmitter. Nice thing about this one is remotely controllable. So I can set this out in the field somewhere, hit a touch tone from the start and turn it on and or turn it off. And again, it's reprogrammable via software and a connecting cable. Okay. Voice America here in actually in Cincinnati. This is a blow up of part of a map that was used for Youth on the Air competition, just to show you what it looks like. There are all kinds of hunts you can do. You can do a low power continuous carrier short distance. Great for beginner hunts, easy setup and fun for kids. What we typically do is we have a picnic or something. We'll set 1 or 2 of these out and we'll get the kids to do it. We'll get the XYLs to do it, and they're just in a park somewhere or in a field somewhere. And very simple hunt, very short distance. It's just a walk, and you can teach the fundamentals of, sensing a direction and watching an S-meter or listening to the strength of a signal without going to a lot of expense, without people having to be confused as to what's going on. The 5 transmitter ARDF hunt, of course, they can be any length. They can be in a small park, you can set 1 through 5 on the same frequency. Now in a national competition, that distance goes up to 10 kilometers, maybe, give or take 10 to 12 kilometers. So you can do 5 or 6 miles. So they're a little bit longer for obvious reasons. They're national and world competitions. Okay, you can do 2-meter or 80-meter hunts, 5 transmitters a cycle, larger areas, topographical maps can be used, longer distances, 4 to 10 kilometers. A foxhole is kind of interesting. It's an orienteering type thing. You get a map and you have circles on the map So basically you're using orienteering skills to navigate to a point on the map. And once you're at that point on the map, within 100 meters of that control point is a low power 10 milliwatt transmitter, and you're using an 80-meter receiver to DF the transmitter after you orienteered to a given location, because you can only hear these within 100 meters because of their low power. So you run your orienteering course, then you DF the Fox, and then you proceed to the next one. And on a Fox Hunt course, depending again on how old you are and your gender, you'll be finding between 5 and typically 10 controls on the course. Here's another Fox Hunt type example. This happens to be at Dayton Hamvention, and we do this for fun on the Saturday of the Dayton Hamvention. And you see people carrying a sheet of paper. That's because we give them an opportunity to find between 30 and 40 transmitters, and they're all out there. And the highest power of any of them is 1 watt, and most of them are less. And Mom's helping her, and this was a few years ago. She's a little bigger, but she and her son show up every year, and they'll find 15 or so of them within the hour or hour and a half. And you notice that they're using the Australian receiver. So everybody's taking the bearings with their tape measure antennas. Okay. These are always fun. We usually have, it varies from year to year, but we'll typically have about 30 teams come out for this during the Hamvention. And he's about to ready to step on a transmitter. He just doesn't realize it. Okay, so tape measure teams, Joe Leggio. There's the information on it. And their equipment, there's a website. Brian Ackerley has the blue box. Of course, Home and End, K0OV always has information about fox hunts in the U.S. The ARRL now posts a radio direction finding site. Transmitters, controllers, or bionics. Other clubs you visit, you can always get a hold of me right here, and I'll be glad to help. Yeah, this is a finish 1 year on our nationals. They brought us in the control beacon, and then made us go across a creek to get to the finish. And that is me, by the way, running to a finish. I know there's a ton of information there, and that's the tip of the iceberg. We've had many a session for building tape measure antennas, which always goes over very well, and you can do it pretty cheaply. The one I did mention, I'll show you 2 of them here. No, you're not going to go this route, I guarantee it, because this is the Rig Experts model. If you could get it, it's probably $400 or $500. The receiver is built into the boom here, and it's fully synthesized. I can program up to a half a dozen frequencies into it. The attenuation's all built in. The timing's built in. It tells me, et cetera, et cetera. It is not a beginner's toy. It has a very steep learning curve. But you can build something like this. And this is a tape measure 2 meter. Now, this happens to be the attenuator that I showed you, KC90N, and the elements just unfold. I do have the 3D printed. Can we see them? Gotta be careful here.
Barely. Yeah, we can
There
see
you go.
them.
These are 3D printed pieces instead of using PVC pipe. The nice thing about these is I loosen these and they all slide right off the boom. So I can slide them in and out. Makes it really easy for shipping, if nothing else. And they're very sturdy. And I take about 10 of these to Dayton every year, and they last about 10 minutes before they're all gone.
Yep.
Yeah, for obvious reasons. This mounts your compass right here, and even found that you can print a. Whoops, there it is. You can print a handle for it. So that's just 2 examples of the tape measures. Questions? Got to be questions.